Okay, we are live. So, welcome to the third English Subbuteo Association player show. And I'm very pleased to... we are live. So, turn that off. So we have three, I had some feedback then, so apologies for that, but we have three very special guests this evening for the ESA show. We have Darren Clark, England legend, English champion. We have Eric Naszayli, ranked world #1, and God knows how many times he's been the French champion, but his hair will give you a clue. And we have Clinton Gahwiler from Cape Town, well, South Africa, actually. I shouldn't say Cape Town, South Africa. And we have Clinton, special guest, who's an organiser in South Africa, a player in South Africa, and he's helping to grow the game in South Africa as well. So welcome, guys. Just remember, when we're doing the interviews, if you can mute your microphone if you're not speaking, it's very important because we can hear other sound and interference from things that you touch next to your microphone. Bear that in mind. So obviously the last show we did was very interesting. We had special guests with Bob Varney, who many people know in the game, and we had Vasco Guimarães as well. So it's a fantastic show. We're joined with Brian Daly as well. So before we start, I just want to say good evening, buenas noches, buonasera, bonsoir, guten Abend, noswatda, that's Welsh, by the way, and Goeland. That's, I think, Afrikaan. I think I'm right, but Clinton's laughing, so it sounds like a dreadful translation. So anyway, welcome. I haven't done a West Country one, Daz, but good evening as well. So
just
yeah, great. So what we're going to do, the format for this evening is we're going to be asking some questions to all three of you, get a bit of insight from you. And one of the first questions that we like to ask is to everybody, and we'll start with Darren. How did you first get into Subbuteo, and how old were you?
Right, I think I probably was about 10 or 11, and I, like a lot of the guys in the UK, used to play in street leagues. So the street I lived in, all the guys in there and the young kids, so we play in the street leagues in people's garages, and we just, we make our own rules up. We played with marbles in the beginning because there wasn't, we didn't have any balls. Then a few years into that, I contacted Waddingtons, like a lot of people did in the UK, and they had a really, really great network, Waddingtons, throughout the UK. So you write into them, you pay £1, you join the association, you get a certificate, and they also put you in touch or give you contact details of people within local leagues. I went down to the Red Catch League in Knoll. I remember it very well, got the bus down there, and there were about 7 or 8 guys in there who were playing proper rules. I discovered something called a blocking flick, and really good players could chip the ball, learnt the rules great, and I still see Aaron regularly now. So, and from there, you got into the regional tournaments and the national tournaments and the international tournaments over 20 or 30 years. But it was through Waddingtons and the network they had throughout the UK, and it's a shame it's not there these days. But so that's how I started.
Brilliant. So you'll have to excuse me, Eric, now, but I'm going to say, comment êtes-vous entré dans Subbuteo et collège avez-vous?
That's a great try, Justin. Thanks for speaking French. Actually, I was offered the game for Christmas when I was 9 by my aunt. And of course, all the figures were broken after a couple of days. It's only until maybe when I was 14 that Waddingtons was running small tournaments in the toy shops. So I eventually played a tournament in the toy shop next to my house. I eventually won that, let's say, tournament for the beginners. And at that time, there was also an event where Christophe Fuseau and some other, let's say, professional players came. So I ended up meeting them and entered the game, let's say, in a more competitive way. So let's say First step was at 9, and then the second step at 14.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. And I think we've all experienced the broken player problem.
Sure.
Now, I don't know Afrikaans, Clinton, so I'm just going to say, how did you get into the game?
Very similar story. I think probably about 10 or 11. I remember being very envious. Two of my friends had this football game, and I eventually got one, I think, for Christmas. And then my eyes opened. I'm half Swiss. When I went to visit my grandmother in Switzerland the one year, I walked into a toy shop and I couldn't believe they had some teams there as well. So that was very exciting, because in South Africa at that time, it was quite hard to get it. Every now and then the shops would get a pile of maybe 10 teams, but they'd sell out quite quickly. And I played until, I guess, some point in high school. And then, as one does, other things come along. And then until about 6 years ago again, got it down from the cupboard and fully back.
Excellent. So it's always really interesting when we talk about how we all got into the game. I think at one point, Subbuteo used to be the #1 Christmas present for boys. But I can't remember which year. It must have probably been certainly in the 70s, I would imagine. But always interested to find out how people started. Funny enough, just to break the ice a little bit, we had a question sent in earlier from Bob Varney, who was one of our special guests, and he's one of his questions was it's for you, Darren. He said, "How old? I need to make sure you don't spill your tea, by the way, when I ask you this. How old were you when you learned that it's 3 flicks per figure and not 4?" I think he's trying to take the
Yeah, how many flicks?
When was it you learned 3 flicks and not 4 flicks per player? Question from Bob.
I still don't know.
Oh, okay. Prison rules, then, Daz. Yeah, but that's Bob for you.
It depends. It depends if Bob's the referee. Really, would be my answer.
Yeah. He's not. He can be a little bit pedantic when he refs, because I think he likes to sort of get involved in the game a little bit too much, and that can be quite frustrating for the two players. I feel he needs to entertain himself.
I mean, in response to that, really going back to Bob, I'd probably like to point out that when we're playing with Bob, when he misses, it's really then it's the other guys go. That's sort of probably where Bob needs to pick up a little.
Excellent. So now I'm going to ask you, Clinton, what was your first ever tournament then? Official tournament.
First ever. Sorry, I was just having a chuckle at your previous question to Darren. I think my clubmates down here will tell you that my challenge is I have to remember to leave, of the set of 12, you're meant to leave 1 in the box and only play with 11. But my first tournament, we used to try and organize at school, but I mean, as kids, but it was never that organized. And then more recently, as I said, we started here about 6 years ago. So our first tournament was here in Cape Town 6 years ago. And then,
Great.
Yeah.
That's good. And Eric, you can take yourself off mute. So what was your first tournament then?
You mean playing the normal rules, not just as a beginner?
The first competitive tournament you played in.
I was 15, and it was in Villeneuve-Saint-Georges, one of the starting clubs of the Subbuteo in France. And it was a tournament where I saw also some Belgian guys coming for the first time from Rochefort, including Thierry Magermans, Titi Gio, Didier Stevenot, and some of the guys that are still playing now. So it was quite an experience. We played in it was in a swimming pool. So in the locker rooms of the swimming pool. So it wasn't really flat, So it was kind of very hard to have flat tables, flat boards. It was quite funny. Even when I was 15, it was a great fun too in that respect.
Okay, excellent. I remember Didier Stevenon. I'm sure I met him probably first time 1983. I can't remember the tournament in Belgium, but I'm sure we stayed at one of the friends' houses, maybe his house. I can't remember. Darren, sorry, Eric, what were you going to say?
There was also two players from Ireland. One of them slept at my place with my parents, and then we went to the event with the underground, with the metro. And maybe you heard the name of those Irish players, Brendan Savage and Ewan Harton.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that goes back in 1982, January 1982.
Wow,
Long time ago.
very long time ago. That's 38 years ago. So that's quite scary, really, for someone like me. Yourself. Yeah. And so, Daz, your first tournament?
Mine was in 1987, and I went to Dave Palsy, actually. We got the train from Bristol to Oxford, and I still remember it. We played in the Oxford Open, and it was the junior and senior competition, and we played in the juniors. I can't remember, 13, 14, something like that. And I was just a bit overwhelmed with it. There were so many people, and to see 20 pitches all set out. I mean, this was just a couple of years after I started playing. So, we really enjoyed it. I managed to win, actually. I won the tournament. We had a great day. And on the way back, those days, Wallington's used to give you a free team just for turning up. So we had funnily enough, Eric, it was a French team, French home, practice home in French Bay. And we took them out of the cases, and me and Palsy glued them in the 4-4-2 starting position on the National Rail train on the table on the way back. So anybody who came sit next to us after we left, we're set up for the next Subbuteo match. So it was a really good day. Well,
well, interesting.
I played a guy from Manchester, and his name was Duncan Gorley. His name stuck with me. Did you remember him?
No, I don't actually. I remember a few people from Manchester, but not him. No.
Yeah,
did you ever play in the Cheltenham Open, Darren? That was.
No, I don't know if that was. There was some guy from Cheltenham. We went to play at his mum and dad's house once with about half a dozen guys. Maybe that was the Cheltenham Open in those days. Yeah,
because
what was his name?
Well, we had Peter Matthews and David Matthews. Eric, you remember them?
Yes, I played David a couple of times, and he and his brother were among the pioneers of the, let's say, FISA English Subbuteo.
Yeah, so when I went to Cheltenham Open, I think it was 1983, sure it was, and that's when I first learned about the. I think that was the first time I learned about the duster and polishing the players. And then because we went home, me and my mate Simon Davis, and we used to play on a snooker table. So we put a pitch on a snooker table, and then we used the duster to polish the bases. And then we realised, actually, wow, this is so much better to play with the polishing of the bases. And that's when that all began, actually, all because of the Cheltenham Open. Yeah. So I had an embarrassing situation the first few games because my players were falling all over the place. I think I got stuffed completely in the event. But anyway, it's another matter. So it's always fascinating to ask these questions to actually get a really good understanding of where your background is in the game. Now, this is a really interesting question. I'm going to ask you, Eric. When you played the game and when you were growing up in the game, which one player would you say you admired and which player you looked up to the most?
Well, on the French scene, of course, Christophe Fuzot was the one to follow because his game was so entertaining and unpredictable. He could play fast. He could score many goals in every game. So I would say Christophe Fuzot when I was 15, 16, 17. And I got to meet some Italian and Belgian players too at that age. including Marc Clerbois of Belgium and Giancarlo Potecchi of Italy in a tournament in Rochefort, and both were amazing in different styles. But I would say Fuso in the first place because he was playing so well and his attacking game was fantastic. The way he shoot at the time, especially, of course, you have to remember we were playing with some figures that needed to a lot of work before you could even chip the ball. Now it looks so strange to say that, but chipping the ball was a challenge, and he could do that almost 9 times out of 10. So amazing.
For me, in France, Christopher Fuso was an amazing player. And I played him in the '88 European Championship for England. And
really?
and I was drawing 0-0 with him, and he was like pretty much the world number one, pretty much at the point. He was there or thereabouts. And I defended for my life the whole game. In fact, I think I only had 2 shots in the whole game, and one of the shots was a super flick, so it wasn't even a clean shot. So I couldn't even get through his defense, yeah? And I'll never forget it. His player was by the fence, and it was by the side of the penalty shooting area. And I had my keeper. In those days, we had to have the keeper on the ground. And I thought, there's no way he's going to chip it from there because A, he can't get his finger in very easily, and B, it'd be too risky for me to lift my keeper up, so I just leave it like that. He only chipped it in, and I never forget his celebration. He went like this in front of my face, and I was like, oh my God. And he actually told me that's one of the best goals he's ever scored in the game. And I was like, gutted, but it was an amazing goal, I have to say. Fantastic. So, Darren, you'd obviously grown up playing the game, and who would you say would be a player that you most looked up to?
I think when I started to play I'd say in the mid-90s, early 90s, really, because after that Oxford tournament in '87, I sort of worked it out and making some notes. I didn't then play another tournament for 7 or 8 years because I was really into my football. And so I played Subbuteo, and I came back and I played in the English qualifier for in '94 to the Chicago one for the World Cup. And Aaron and Dave Palsy were playing in the English circuit a lot, so the standard was reasonable. And then I was playing them on a semi-regular basis. So even though I hadn't played for 7 or 8 years, I was still playing with Aaron. So went to Chicago, which was great. I mean, it was when I got there, I realised that I was about 3 or 4 goals worse than the top players in Europe. You know, my level was nowhere near good enough for the international level in those days. But I struggled and I didn't qualify from the group. I almost did, but I didn't. But then I watched Dominic DeMarco, and he just, I was at my level thinking I can't qualify from the group. And there was this guy just smashing goals past everyone and then beating Fuso in the final. And I watched the game and I thought, crikey, he was the guy I looked at and thought, how do you ever get that good at this game? Just from where I was at that time and where he was, it just seemed, not a goal, like an ocean away. It was, incredible. For me at that point, he was the guy. And then as you get into the game, you play more, you improve a bit. And I think then going through, it's an era thing. I started it with maybe DeMarco, then through the late 90s, Vasco was the sort of main guy. He was incredible. I think I got a 2-2 draw once, but with multiple hidings, along the way. And then probably as Carlos has been, at a different level, really. So it's an era thing. But when I started, it was certainly DeMarco in that Chicago tournament, watching him beat people and the ease in which he played. He was the one for me at that stage.
He was an incredible player, and used to. If you ever played in a tournament and the name DeMarco came out in your group, you just hoped there was an R instead of a D. So it was Raymond DeMarco, his younger brother, I think he was, and it wasn't Dominic in the draw.
Dominic was great in picking up goals. I mean, he would he would be at his best in big championships. He could be, let's say, more an average player in international opens or Grand Prix, but as soon as there was a World Championship, European Championship, Belgium Championship, then he would get the best out of his game and mind.
Yeah, incredible player. So Clinton, I know obviously you haven't been playing in competitive tournaments like Darren and Eric for the years that they have, but has there been anybody that you've sprung to mind that you look up to and you've seen that you think, wow, this player's amazing?
Yeah, no, when I listen to these stories and obviously looking on the internet, I really feel we've missed out here in the southern tip of Africa. I think when I was younger, because there wasn't much organized, there were lots of people playing the game, but it wasn't really organized on a national level. And then really prior to, I feel like if we'd had the internet 30 years ago, I might have been much more involved, good to see what was. I had no idea that people were playing internationally still and whatever. But when I was younger, two things spring to mind. The one was I remember staring up at the Subbuteo catalogue, I forget what year it was, and seeing that young Italian guy that I think his name Piccalugo or something, and it always stayed with me. I used to stare at this thinking, oh, wow, I wish I could travel and play like that. And then the other person that we really always admired was my one friend who got me into the game. His father was amazing. We just couldn't beat him for a long time. And then I'll never forget the first time that I did beat him. He did older adults after all. But yeah, and now these days, obviously we I guess it's amazing because we can learn by watching, the top players on YouTube. And yeah, so I wouldn't say there's any one particular player, but it's good to see what's going on internationally.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really very difficult question for you and for Darren and Eric, actually. But I'm going to start with Darren on this one. I'm going to start with the UK. So who would you describe as the best player you've faced in the UK? And then I'm going to ask you the same question, but in the world as well. So the UK and the world. So who would you give as your answers for this? And maybe you have multiple, I don't know. But oh, Darren, you're on mute. You're on mute, Daz.
Yeah, I forgot when I'm back on. For me in the UK would be Casper. I played with Casper for 10, 12 years before he went to Asia. And I'd say during that time, both of us improved probably quite a lot from 2000 to 2010. That was the period where I got better results than before. And Casper was very competitive. But I'd say for me with Casper, he keep control of the ball very well, but he keep control of his mind very well. Those are the two things.
Yeah,
He'd be very controlled. He could play the game, and he kept together, Casper. I mean, there's lots of good players in Britain, but I think if you had to pick one, it would be Casper. And also, he's the only British or English player to make a fifth World Cup final. So
that's right.
That alone probably. So for England, it would, or Britain would be Casper. When you talk about players in the world, the same names come up, don't they? You have Vasco's and Willie Hoffman's and Carlos's, and I think there's another name check really, and there's a guy, Bolognino. I mean, that guy's probably won the World Cup or European Championships more times than anybody, but he rarely gets talked about in the circle when you bring up the top players ever, and I find that strange. I mean, I've had some great games with him. Some I've lost some. But over here, the real ding-dongs, and the guy's won the World Cup or European Championships probably more often than many people. But that said, for me, it would probably be overall, to pick one, would be Carlos, and that was really just on the back of when we had a good tournament with Glide, Slide, Chip and Dip in 2 or 3 years ago. We made the final of Mons, and it was another one where I hadn't played for 2 years before. So during the group stages, you and Chris Thomas are still teaching me the latest rules and explaining what a smashing rule is, and I can't flick a flip. Like only to the next further forward. And I got hammered in the groups. I lost 2 or 3 games, and I was a disaster. And then you get into, we managed to get through, and every game I think I got a little better. And by the time we made the final, I was exhausted. And I remember you coming over to me with a big smile on your face, telling me you put me against Carlos Flores. So yeah, still. And I remember the first half. It was only 2-1. I scored a goal. I was in it a little bit. And the second half, Carlos just tore me apart. I think the final score was about 6-1. And I didn't have an answer, and I don't think I've ever really felt like I've been completely beaten that much. So for me, that was, I think he's the best ever.
Well, as we know, that Mons trip was an amazing trip. I'm sure we can share that a bit. But Eric, so who would you say has been described as the best player
in the UK?
In the UK that you faced, and of course, and then the world is going to be obviously very challenging for you. But who is it? Who would you say? He's frozen because he doesn't want to answer the question. It's amazing. Are you with us, Eric, or have you gone? Okay, so I'll ask the same question to you, Clinton.
So,
if you've not played many people,
well, in the UK, I've only ever played 1 or 2 games, and that happened to be we managed to roll out an Astro onto the pool table in the Chelsea dining room, and had 1 or 2 games against 1 or 2 staff members there, but they weren't particularly good. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get a game in London. I tried very hard, and there was no one available when I was there. It was just over a year ago. And in terms of the best player in the world, I'd like to say it's one of my friends from Cape Town Club, but Justin, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was you, actually.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, I mean, it's only because I've managed to travel to Cape Town, I suppose. But in the world, I mean, did you, because of your history and it's kind of Swiss background, did you ever come across Willie Hoffman?
I actually met him. I was in Switzerland just prior to COVID, and managed to play in 2 tournaments there. And the rest of the guys, they were very excited when I'd actually made contact with Willie before I went over, and he actually popped in. And the players over there hadn't seen him for many years, I think, or he hadn't been involved in any way. And he actually popped in, and he didn't play, but he came to see what was happening in the current game, and yeah, it was great.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend of the game. Certainly in the 80s, for me, he was the best player in the world. And he's from Switzerland, and although he's very close with Renzo Frignani, because he was obviously very good as well. But amazing player, amazing talent. Eric, we lost you for a moment, and now you're back, which is great. How is it that Paris can be a worse connection than South Africa? I think you're on mute. You're no sound, Eric. There's no sound, Eric. No sound. So maybe. Okay, whilst Eric's, just try to speak as soon as you get your sound back, Eric, but you've got no sound at the moment. So obviously we'd love to hear your answer for that question. You are still on mute, so you may have not. Just check you're plugged in. But, Darren? He's gone again, so he's going to have to plug back in. Yeah, so look, here's a great question for you, Darren. I played in so many great games. I mean, I've been in your team and played with you, and you've been a fantastic player to play with. For me, you're one of the greatest English players of all time, as far as I'm concerned. You are the most competitive player I've ever faced in a friendly as well, which is unbelievable, Clinton, because believe you me, he doesn't give you anything in a friendly. Though, in fact, it's not even called a friendly, actually, with Darren. But so...
Clinton will back on this, won't you, Clinton? It's a habit, losing. Yeah, you only play one way.
Exactly, yeah. So what would you say has been your most memorable match, Darren,
My most
over the years?
memorable match.
Are you with us, Eric?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thanks. Go ahead, Darren.
We'll just hold your question for a bit, Eric. Darren.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, Eric, you fire away. Go on.
Shall I?
Okay. So for the English players I got to play over these years, I would say in no particular order, because of course it's hard to pick just one, because we're talking about different conditions. For example, Kevin Dyson, when he was playing with flats, actually played with flats, it was very hard to beat, because he would keep the ball for so long and be so a great defender, and he was playing flats in a great way. For sure, I would pick Carl and Tim Young too, because the Tim when he was in his days was amazing in terms of attacking skills and variety of attacking game. Bob Varney, of course, because is not only his game, but his mind is so dedicated to be competitive in everything he does.
He'll love that, by the way.
Yeah. And also the thing about Bob is that he moved from the ESA rules and game to the FISA and FISTF, which is kind of a challenge. So he really needs credit for that. And of course, in the younger generation, I would pick from the ones I played, of course, because I can't talk about the ones I haven't played against. But you, Justin, and Chris Thomas and Chris Short, amazing players. And I wish there was a lot more these days in 2020-21. But these would be my UK choice for the ones I played against. And now, when it comes to world players, of course, I would talk about Carlos, but I haven't played Carlos actually. This is one of the things I'd like to achieve in the next few months. But of course, Carlos is in a different category. But from the ones I played over years, I would pick, of course, Willie Hoffman from Switzerland. Not only was he great in the way he played, but he was both a great attacker and a great defender. He could do both in a brilliant way. Of course, Renzo Frignani was also an amazing player. Playing against him with the figures we had at the time was like playing against an octopus. The ball would come from one side to the other side, in a fast way sometimes, in a slower way other times. Very hard to counter. Vasco, of course, Vasco Guimaraes is probably the best talented player, the most natural player the game has ever seen.
Amazing.
And Dominic DeMarco for what it achieved. But as we said earlier, I think Dominic, in terms of natural skills and natural games, were a little under the other guys I just mentioned. But the ability Dominic had to win big events or to be great in big events was outstanding.
Yeah. No, he amazing. And I'll tell you a very interesting story now. In 1986, when I played in the Subbuteo World Cup in Athens, everybody was very excited about the Italian team because they were very much in the Subbuteo world. Italy were very strong. And here was an interesting situation because I'll never forget the day before the tournament, there was like a practice session tournament, and the two Italian players came down in their Italian tracksuits, Mario Baglietto and Renzo Frignani. And this was amazing because everybody crowded around their table because they trained for about maybe about 30 minutes. And all they did really was flick the player from the shooting line up to the ball on the center circle or just on the halfway line. And they just practiced sliding their players. And in those days, it was really hard to slide the player up to the ball, but they were experts, and everybody was watching them going, oh my God, they like do this 9 out of 10 times. What bases have they got? It's amazing. Of course, today it's like really easy, but in those days, everybody was watching and everybody was going, this is really phenomenal, you know? So that's when you kind of realized the difference in terms of, I suppose, the quality that a certain nation had over the rest of the world. And maybe obviously that was competitive with Belgium at the time as well, because Belgium are very strong as well, always. But just fascinating to sit and watch Mario Baglietto go up to the ball. And I was thinking, I hope I don't get him in my group, but I did, unfortunately. Anyway, so Darren, I'll put you on mute because there's a little bit of crackling coming through, so apologies for that, mate. But talked about the last question. We'll talk about the most memorable match. So, what would you say has been your most memorable match of all time? There's probably two men, but what would you hand select?
Well, I've given this a bit of thought, and I can come up with two matches that stick with me. And I'm not sure if it says more about me, but I actually lost them both. And the first one was the Champions League final with Murcia, and I think it was 2010, 2011. I can't remember the exact year. It was in Manchester, and we had a really great team with Murcia. And they were young guys then. I think most of them have won the World Cup individually since then. Alberto Mateus won the Guerra with Jose Ross, Miguel Lopez, Angel Valverde, Juan Carlos Granados, and myself. And that was our team. And nowadays, that would, some of those guys are, some of the best in the world. But back then, they were very, very good, and they were young. And we were a little bit unfancied, but we played well all the way through. And I won my first 9 games throughout the whole tournament, and then we made the final. And once we played in the final, I lost my match. We played Pisa, and I remember I took centre, lost possession quickly, and then within a minute I'm a goal down. And I remember that game. We played quite well, but we lost. We lost the final. I'm not really sad about it because it was a great achievement over the 2 days for the sort of the young Spanish team with me to try and help them out. And it was a great final. And I suppose the other guys have gone on to do great things since then. And making a final of the Champions League and they're sort of in their late teens, early 20s gives great confidence. So Bob was supposed to be there that weekend, but he didn't turn up, and I had to pay for the whole room that we were supposed to pay half each. Bob remembers that. I still got his tracksuit. So, but that was a great one. And the other game was, I think, 2005, 2006. It was the World Cup in Tournai. It was the semi-final. I'd made to the semi-final of the Open, and it's the closest I've got to winning the World Cup. It went to extra time. It went to shots. It was a close game with Bolognino. I played well, but I think I lost 3-2 or 4-3 on shots in the end. But that one again, this at the time. But when you look back years later, you think, I'm quite pleased with that. Really, certainly based on the amount of time I played and the amount of tournaments I went to. I think when I did go, I tended to do reasonably well. So those are the two standout ones for me.
Great stuff, Daz. We had a message actually, Clinton, from one of your compatriots. He said, Clinton, why didn't you tell the lads you were on ESA?
I can see the SMSs as they pop up. I just didn't want to be rude and respond while I'm facing the camera.
So question to you then, what's been your most memorable match, Clinton?
Well, in South Africa, I guess it's I've always really particularly enjoyed playing Clifford Graaf. I'm not sure he might be watching now. I usually don't manage to beat him. Sure. I don't think I ever have in the competition, actually. But a real highlight for me is always when I do get to play people outside of South Africa, or visitors to South Africa. And we've been quite fortunate. We've had visiting players from Germany, from Portugal. We've had Peter Leggy from the USA, and of course you, Justin. But actually, I think the one that really stands out for me was actually against Pascal Druven from Belgium.
South Africa, or to South Africa.
I'm not sure what happened there. Anyway.
Okay.
And it was memorable for me because having watched YouTube videos and whatever, and catching up on the tactics, and it was the first time that I'd really implemented, I think, proper defensive strategies, and I couldn't believe what a difference it made. So that really stood out for me.
Yeah,
and it was just amazing having Pascal and his clubmate here, and just it was a good time.
Yeah, all of a sudden you learn very quickly you can't play 4-4-2.
Yeah.
Unless you're Carlos.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So thank you for that, Clinton. So Eric.
Yes.
You've had too many matches to remember, I know, but what would you say would be your most memorable match?
I will pick a couple, like Darren, probably 2 or 3. One was semi-final of Sucy-en-Brie against Fuseau that I won 5-2. And the thing is, I played brilliant from the first to the last minute, and in the crowd and in the stands, because in Sucy tournament there were some grandstands surrounding the pitches towards the end of the event. There was Frignani, Vasco, Bolognino, all those guys that have been eliminated before, and they were watching the game, and I really thrashed Fuseau. But unfortunately, I lost against Gilles Delogne, who I could have put in the list of the top players, of course. Gilles was an amazing player too. I lost 3-2 in the final, but my achievement was to thrash Christophe in the semi, and I also beat him in the French Cup 6-2. Some in the 90s, in the mid 90s too. So beating him with such a big difference of goals was just amazing. I remain unbeaten against him for 3 years in a row, but most of our games were really close. In those 2 games, especially, I really outclassed him by far, and that was a great feeling.
Brilliant. So, great story to share. So just staying with you, Eric, what would you say has been your greatest achievement in the game?
Probably being world number 1 in the world ranking at the end of the season for 3 years in a row, in 93, 4, and 5 as a player. But I'm really proud of being able to follow, let's say, a decent career as a player, but also create and run the biggest club in France, FTC Issy-les-Moulineaux, and that carried on even when I stopped playing. So training young guys, picking those young guys from school, teaching them how to play, and getting them into the game, and bringing them something as player and as human being was also an amazing thing to live over years. So I'm really proud of having been able to do both in a great way.
Excellent. Okay. So obviously with Clinton, you haven't sort of, I suppose, played in many because of the location more than anything in international tournaments. Has there been any achievement that you would say you've made that you think is in the game? I mean, clearly you are a sports psychologist and you are a musician as well. Not a lot of people know that Clinton has played. Are you a guitarist for one of the top bands in South Africa? You're on mute. You're on mute, Clinton. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, yeah, I play guitar, not very well. I think I'm more of a songwriter, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, on a in a playing wise, I guess it was winning one of the little tournaments in Switzerland just over a year ago. But actually, what I'm most proud of actually is just being involved with a group of other guys here and getting it going again in South Africa. Yeah, and especially starting it in Cape Town and building that up slowly, and also finally getting my first decals right, which is probably the most notable achievement after many failures.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
I've never tried. I've got to ask, obviously, the legend that is Mr. Darren Clark. So, what would you? I mean, you've had lots of achievements in the game. What would you say has been your greatest achievement in the game? Oh, he's not on mute. His sound's not on, Daz.
Where is he?
I can't see him anymore.
Oh, he's gone. His sound is. Here we go. Let's try again. You there, Darren? We can see you now. Are you there?
But you're still muted, Darren.
Yeah. Darren, are you there?
Nope.
He's muted still.
There we go.
Here we go. Darren, you there? You've muted yourself, Daz, so you need to. He's coming back on. So, I mean, Darren's got some great stories, just like you have, Eric, as well, on that front. What would you say has been your? It's difficult because we've played in so many great tournaments in Europe, Clinton. So, probably a question for Darren and Eric on this one. So, Eric, what would you say is the greatest tournament you think you've played in?
You mean the greatest or the one I prefer to play in?
Okay, answer both.
Okay, so I really love to go to play in Milan for the Torneo di Natale because I've been there many times, even in the old days, and they have a great team of organization, very friendly, great people. The level is just amazing, of course, because you play in Italy, and even some players sometimes you don't know their name, but they can play really great. So it's kind of a challenge even to go out of the group stage. So I would pick Milan and of course the city of Milan is great to visit, and the food and the girls and everything. You know what I'm talking about. So and of course in terms of let's say big organizations, Mons and Sucy would be on the list. Special thanks to Olivier Père, who is running Mons for some 30 years, and Laurent Garnier, who started the big shows in Sucy-en-Brie. But for sure, my first choice would be Milan.
Milan, interesting. I'm not going to ask Darren about Milan because we've had some adventures in Milan in recent years. Daz, are you online with us now? You've frozen again. Are you with us? He's freezing. His Wi-Fi. See, he's in the West Country. They drink a lot of cider in the West Country, and I would have thought he'd have had a good connection. You not got a good connection, Darren? You with us? I've got him now. Are you there, Darren?
Connection's fine, mate. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're with us twice now. We've got you twice.
Am I back, Justin?
You are, mate. Yes, you are back live. So thank God for that. I was thinking the person that's closest to me seems to be having more of a problem now, which is hopefully you're back now, mate. So, right, your big question. What would you say has been your greatest achievement in the game?
Yeah. in terms of the results, it was actually winning a tournament, a fist tournament. It was like an unofficial World Masters. It was held in the UK, but with a line up of Flores, Vasco, Naszayli, Eric Verhaag.
Right, he's gone again. So his Wi-Fi's gone, I think. So, okay. Darren was just sharing with everybody then, played in a World Masters in Bristol tournament where he played, essentially, I think he played Naszayli in the final, but all the big names were there, Flores, Vasco, I think, but a few, all the top players. It was a very special event, and Darren won it. He won the event. I think, funny enough, I think he won every round on shots, which was amazing. But even so, to beat all those great players was a fantastic achievement. And it was astonishing, really, and it just showed that he had all the support of the people in Bristol, and he did fantastically well. I was just sharing your story, Darren, beating Naszayli in the final.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I'm back. So yeah. I mean, I was a goal down for most of the game and managed to equalise in the last couple of minutes, and then they went to a shootout, and then a sudden death shootout. And then I finally beat a top Italian player in a shootout for a change. And what was added, the added spice of 5,000. I think it was £5,000 for prize money. So there was a little bit more at stake than just a normal trophy. So it hired the stakes. So I was really pleased with that.
Did you paint the town in the evening?
Yeah. Me and Casper took the guys out for a night in Bristol. None of them ever came back, but yeah, it was a great.
I can imagine, yeah.
Night.
But honestly, brilliant achievement that was. Fantastic. I've got the photo. Okay, so I broke up a little bit, Darren, then, but so we're going to move on to your best tournament, Darren. What would you say is your most favourite tournament that you've played in?
It started. I think I went 93, 94 when it very first.
Can we just note, Justin, that the best connectivity here is to Africa?
Yeah, well, that's been fairly obvious. I think the funny thing with Darren, I think maybe his girlfriend is watching Netflix or something, or certainly downloading something on Netflix. Maybe that's causing the interference, because people forget that sometimes. But anyway, he'll be back, I'm sure. But I'm not sure what his favourite tournament is, Darren. Actually, I can't answer that question for him. So here's an interesting question for you both, and I'll start with you, Clinton. What game rule do you dislike the most?
I'd have to say offsides, just because it always catches me. I never remember to check, and that's the one on the one level, on a playing level, and then just because I do like to keep things as realistic as possible. And I've always struggled a bit with the idea of throw-ins, that you can throw it, that far. But I mean, that's, yeah. But no, on the whole, I know there's lots of discussion around the rules, and I actually think the rules have evolved really well over the years.
Well, it's amazing how the rules have changed. I mean, I think when we look at the smashing rule was the most interesting rule to develop, because it was like everybody was smashing people's defenses out of the way, and it became a bit of a joke, actually. You're watching the game and you could just see people or players just blasting the defense out of the way, and it just made the game look really untidy. And I think that for me was a really interesting rule change, but a rule change that really should never have happened. But it only happened, I think, because of the figures and the new type of bases that we're playing with. So we have to try to find a way that makes the game look cleaner, and that's why the smashing rule was brought in. Many of you will know I did a video on smashing entitled. I think it was from Willie van Bonkers actually many years ago on Facebook, which was quite amusing. But smashing rule was interesting. Eric, what would you say is the one rule that you dislike the most?
These days is the consecutive free kicks that the defenders do to prevent great attacking moves, and it's so easy now with the figures to throw the ball away, throw an attacker away 2, 3, 4 times in a row, which is why at Fistuf we've been working on a way to balance a little bit more these things, because it's not as you say about the smashing. It's a way to clean the game and to make it more let's say spectacular and visible for spectators and for newcomers, because as the smashing was very dirty all the time, Erik Verhagen was a classic. Erik Verhagen was most of his game was smashing defense, and then once the defense was out of the way, then he could get into the shooting area, and that was very dirty. But on the other hand, when you have a defender that is always creating free kicks, you can't play. So this is a rule I dislike.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Darren, I'm going to ask you 2 questions really. So because obviously we lost you for a little bit. Hopefully you're back now, mate. What's been your most favourite tournament of all time, and which rule do you dislike the most?
I think, like I was trying to explain before I got cut off, Susi was the one that stood out for me when I first started playing. And I suppose, like all of us, you always remember the first huge big tournaments for 2 or 3 years. We went to Susi, and that was the highlight of the Subbuteo calendar for us in those days. Then we started to go to Mons and still do when we can. So I think those 2, probably Susi, just because it was the very first one that we went to. That we used to hire a minibus from Bristol and all pile on the minibus and drive there down to Paris. It was a great weekend. In terms of the rule, I think, like I mentioned in the smashing, I get that. I think the rule probably needs adapting a little bit. I mean, maybe deliberate smashing is the foul, because there's sometimes you're playing and something happens, and then 3 or 4 kicks later, you, the opponent, and the referee realise that there was a free kick given before, because it's so subtle sometimes. It's not intentional, it just happens, and it really doesn't justify a change of possession or a free kick in big important games when possession is so important. So I understand the need to ban the crazy stuff that used to happen, which was spoiling the game, but I think if the rule could be adapted to deliberate smashing, then that is a free kick. But when you slide the player 3/4 of the length of the pitch, touch the ball very delicately to maintain possession, your player goes and it just knocks into one player, which then falls onto another. I'm not sure that really is a free kick or should be a free kick, because when it happens to every player in the world, you go, oh God, not because you've made a mistake or made a foul. It's, oh, what a crazy rule. That's really bad. And when everybody has the same reaction, that for me would be the one.
Yeah,
that for me would be the one to maybe look at. Yeah.
May I jump into it?
Of course.
It's interesting because we for years we have attempted to write it in a way that it leaves more room to the referee, whether it's deliberate or not. And I'm sure Clinton, as a sports psychologist, will comment on that too. But as a referee, you're not in the player's head, in the player's mind, so you don't know when it's deliberate or not. And we have the same thing with the defenders that are provoking free kicks. And most of the times they say, oh, sorry, it wasn't on purpose. So the fact that saying it's on purpose or not is really, really tricky, even for professional referees. So imagine in most of our games, we also have players that are referees, of course, and they don't have the power to say, yes, this is a free kick, or no, this isn't a free kick. Which is why we've tried to write it in a way to remove any reference to deliberate. There is a situation that gives a free kick or doesn't give a free kick, but giving or writing the word deliberate is opening the door to
can of worms. That's what
it will be a ref in a different way, whether you're ref
Yeah,
a
yeah,
15-year-old guy or a 25 or 50-year-old guy.
Yeah, I have to say, I think that is the problem. It's the grey area of deciding in a match, was this deliberate or not deliberate? And most of the times it's obvious it was unintentional. Most of the time it's when it isn't obvious, and it's that moment which could determine the outcome of an opportunity to score. And that's the problem. That's why with the rule, sometimes you have to have this black and white situation. Otherwise, you may find that somebody will interpret it different to another person, and you have a big problem in terms of confrontation between two players and the referee. So I think it's a very difficult one. I mean, for me, the one rule that I hate actually over the years is the free kick, where the defender blocks when you're making a moving run, and they interfere with your play, and the referee says free kick. The defender then can get player behind the ball in a good position, and you've lost the momentum as the attacker, and it should be the advantage for the attacker. So for me, the one rule that I really disliked in the new game was the free kick, and I think actually I still think the back rule is a better rule in many situations where you just say back because it was obviously foul from the defender. I should have the advantage, and maybe I have the choice, back or free kick. I'm the attacker. Why should I lose? Why should I have a disadvantage? So I think there's lots of little rules that we could change, but everybody's different in terms of their opinion. So that's life, unfortunately. We won't talk about VAR tonight because we will probably all fall.
I take your point, Eric, on the smashing. I take your point, Eric, on the smashing. It has to be definitive. But that aside, I think the rules are pretty good. I wouldn't change any of it. There's always, like Justin's mentioned there, we used to have the back and miss a block as well, wasn't it? You had a back and then the defender missed the block, which means you could touch up and have a basically free shot. That was. But it's just generally now I think the rules are fine. I think everything's changed: the equipment, the goals, the balls, the rules, everything. And I think it's evolved. One thing, it's one thing I not struggle with. I've never really done. It's the veteran category. I always felt that when the veteran category first came out, the concept of it was for guys that didn't want to take it seriously, didn't want to play competitively, wanted to come along and just play in some friendly matches. It's now become like a second competitive category where I'm not sure. I think we don't have a lot of players, and for me, I think it would be nice just to put everybody in there. And if the guys don't want to take it seriously, or the older guys don't want to play competitively, then they just play with no referees. And then you put because you can play. I mean, Justin's 50, I'm 49. I'm not sure Eric's age, but probably the same sort of age. We can all play 5 or 6, 10 games. So, for me, I think we don't have enough players, and I don't see the value in the veteran category. Personally, I would rather everybody plays. You have under 18s, under 15s, and then over 18s, and that's it. I think it would make the higher. Standard high, and I think that the way the veteran category is played and competed now was not, and it may be a good or a bad thing, but it was not the intention when it started.
I agree.
That's a really interesting point, Darren, actually. And Clinton, in South Africa, obviously, with tournaments, your numbers are limited. But even actually in England, France, numbers are limited. And I think it's really interesting that we should be talking about this, because I think now is the time when we should be looking to change this, because for me, I think they should be like, we go back to the old days in the 80s where we had junior and senior. One of the biggest problems we have in England is trying to get a team together. And the reason why we have a problem is because we have trying to get an England team in the Open and an England team in the Vets and then a junior team, etc. And we don't have enough people available to travel. So actually, it'd be better if we could just say, can we just have a senior and junior team? It'd be easier for us to organise than having all these different categories. And I think maybe a few years ago, all these categories were a fair point. But I think what's happened is the veteran category has been created because the players of old have realised they can't win tournaments like they used to. And I, I'll include myself, playing Carlos Flores, I'd say, compared to Francesco Mattiangeli. They're both great players, fantastic players, but I know I'd rather play Francesco and have a glass of red wine with him after the match.
Or before, maybe.
Or before, yeah. But I think that's the point, isn't it? I think we've got to think about making it accessible for even countries like South Africa to play in the World Cup. Do they send an open team? Do they send a vets team? Because it's difficult to get everybody, and they end up having to choose an open team or vet team because of lack of players. And the same for America as well, USA. When they play, they don't have all the categories covered. So we need to think about this, I think, for the future of the game. And I think Darren's made a very good point there about that. I really do. Yeah. So my next question.
Only maybe 2 or 3 countries in the world.
Yeah.
I will tell how it came in the first place, all those categories, but it wasn't for, let's say, sportive reasons back in the 90s. I will tell this to you guys around a glass of wine, not on Facebook.
Okay, here's an interesting question. So,
okay, to be continued.
Yeah, to be continued. So, Clinton, for you in South Africa, I'm not sure about your experiences of playing the game overall, but what would you say has been the funniest thing you've experienced in years of playing? And I'm dreading Darren's answer for this one, but clearly, Clinton.
The first thing that pops into my mind is actually one of our players here in Cape Town. He is, on the one hand, fiercely competitive, but on the other hand, a very, very decent guy and very Christian, actually. And I'll never forget the one tournament, we had a few 10 and 11-year-olds playing for the first time. And when you play them, the aim is just to teach them. And it got to the final match of the round robin section, and this guy had to play one of the 10 or 11-year-olds, and he had to beat him by, I forget, 5 or 6 goals or something. And we just knew this was going to send him into incredible conflict in his head as to what to do there. And we had a lot of fun watching him. And in the end, he actually couldn't do it. He won the game, but he just beat him 1-0. But yeah, I'm sure there've been many more moments, but that was just the first thing that popped into my head.
Oh, great. Okay. So, Eric, what would you say, what's the funniest thing you've experienced in the years that you've been playing the game? There's probably too many stories for you, but...
There's many stories, but some stories back in the 90s, in the first Dublin Open in Ireland, most of them were sleeping on the carpet at Martin Taylor's, the organizers, at Martin Taylor's place, and we were always, let's say, starving or looking for food, because he tend to drink coffee and be fed with beer. So every time the Italians or the French or the Belgians, or we wanted to have lunch or go someplace to eat, and he was always looking for a place to drink instead, even at this place. So it was kind of a fun thing between us, coming from outside Ireland. It was great fun. I really enjoyed those years. Most of the tournaments I played in the 90s around around Europe mostly were just very exciting, because it wasn't the same numbers as we have now. In fact, we have less players playing, but we have more players in tournaments. So we don't have as much time to share between us.
Yeah.
Back in the days, we were always we would always have time to have dinner together between the different countries and take time to drink and everything. Whereas now with the tournaments with 200 players, you start at 8, you finish at 10 in the evening, and or 9 in the evening, sometimes at most 9 or 10 in the evening. You don't even have time to share a beer with the friends, which is a pity in a way.
Yeah, one of the great things of playing the game is normally wherever we play, there's normally somewhere to access beer. So if you have a bad match, the bar is only a few meters away from kind of calming your situation down. I've always said that one beer is okay, but if you have 2 beers, it's going to affect your game big time.
Sure. Except for Wolfgang Leitner. He can have 20 and still plays well.
Yeah. He does,
actually. The more he drinks, the more better he is. In
fact, the Austrians tend to drink a lot of beer, don't they?
Sure.
I've noticed. Yeah. So Darren, I mean, obviously this question, about what's the funniest thing that it's happened to experience in the years of play, and I can probably think of about 25 stories that I've had as an experience with yourself. Funny experiences, and that's just you. So too many to mention, but I'll leave this to you to answer.
Okay, I mean, we won't talk about the barrel or the loudspeaker in Milan, shall we? Well, I mean, that probably needs a reference, but I think in terms of the funny experience, I mean, it wasn't really funny at the time. In fact, it was pretty depressing at times. Funny to look back on, but it was. This is probably my most vivid memory of Subbuteo, all the tournaments and wins and losses. But it's a trip, and it was to Monaco for the Champions League in I think 2003, 2004, and we were playing with the unpopular team of the English Premier League. We only had 4 players. It was myself, Chris Thomas, the ever popular Eric Verhagen, and Joe Misfood. So. An interesting lineup there, to say the least. And Bob was playing with the Spanish guys at Murcia. So Chris was living in Cardiff at the time. He came to Bristol. We drove to Stansted. We arranged to meet Bob. We were going to fly out on the Friday night from Stansted to Nice, go to the hotel, have some dinner, and be ready for the next game. The next days, everyone was very excited. From our team, the English Premier League, Eric and Joseph were already in Nice, so we were all excited. It was bad weather. We got to the airport, went to the bar, had a few drinks. The flight was delayed. No problem. We have a few more drinks. The flight's delayed again. Great news. A few more drinks. Oh, then the flight's cancelled. That's not so great. So we see what other flights or options are. There's no further flights that day. No further flights the following day. All flights the weekend are cancelled. So we're in Stansted now, and probably only because we'd spent the last 5 hours in the bar, we decided that the best thing to do was go to the car park, get in my company car, which was an Volkswagen at the time, and drive to Nice. So that's what we did. We drove down to the Eurotunnel. Unfortunately, it was a fire there, so they closed that. So then we had to go down to the ferry port. So we got to the ferry port. Chris Thomas couldn't find his passport, but there was no stopping us at this point. So we put him in the boot of the car, hid him under the bags, and got on. And then came off at Calais. And Bob said, "It's okay. I used to do a lot of cycling in France. I know the way. We don't need a map. Just keep going straight all the way." So that's what we did. And this time we're feeling a bit tired. We've sobered up. We're hungry. Everything's cold. And it was about 4 in the morning. We worked out the only way we could get there is to drive all through the night and shift. So Chris Thomas couldn't drive the car for no reason. I don't know why. We still don't know now. But he was asleep in the back. And Bob and I would have an hour each. So we drove as fast as we could for an hour, then swap positions. And this would keep going. And we worked out if we did that, we'd get to the tournament about 10:30. And we'd just about make the second session. So this is what we're doing. And we're driving along. And there was the lowest moment, the absolute lowest moment was I looked up, I was driving, I saw a sign, I said, Leon, 489 kilometers. And Bob looked at me and said, I reckon Leon's about halfway. And the three of us privately were dying, but we said anything. And then my car started losing power, and then we stopped. We had lots of food, and then the sun came up, and 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and we're still flying down. And we arrived at the venue just before 11 o'clock, and the guys, I forget who was organising the venue, but they were great. They changed our matches. Eric and Joe were there, and they pushed a few sessions back for us, which was nice of them. But we arrived at 11 o'clock, and 10 past 11, we were playing our first match, and we played all our group matches back to back. So we were incredibly tired. We just about qualified. We thought, oh, we can go now. Fantastic. We go get some sleep. And as we're walking out the hall, the announcer announces the first round of the last 16 knockout stages, and we were drawn against the reigning champions, Mattersburg. And that was, and this was a great game. At half time, 3 of us were winning 1-0, and Chris Thomas was actually beating Vasco 2-0. So we were 4-0 up in games, and 4-0 up in goals, 5-0 up in goals. So we couldn't believe it. And then the inevitable happened. The second half, it was goal, 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 goal. We only had the 4, and I remember asking Robert Lenz, so what's the score now? And it was 0-0 with the last few seconds. And when we were just exhausted, and I've just hit a goal kick up the pitch and just flicked a player on the right, and luckily it's gone flying in the goal, and we won the match. And it was great. And then we went back to the hotel, slept all night, came back to the tournament the next morning, but we played the quarterfinals. I forget who we played. We didn't do very well. It was one game too much for us that weekend. But it was a really, you had to dig deep to get there. And then I suppose the icing on the cake really was so on the way there, we had something to look forward to. It was exciting. But once the tournament finished and we're tired, we had to drive 18 hours back home for no reason. So Bob Varney had worked this out and came to Chris and I and said, guys, I'm going to leave you to drive home. I'm going to catch the EasyJet return flight from Nice back to London. So Bob was up in bed at 9 o'clock. Chris and I drove back. We stopped at a place called Dijon. We went to get some sleep, but Chris had left all the windows open in the car, woke us up again at 4 a.m, soaking wet. And we eventually got back to Bristol at about 5:30 in early evening on the following Monday. And it probably took me a week to recover. So, was it the funny moment? I suppose now I can smile. It probably took me 10 years to smile. Yeah.
Have you ever forgiven Bob, Darren?
Probably. That's why I take the extra 4 flick every time we play, just.
Yeah, well, get your own back. Yeah, absolutely. So we've had somebody posted a message whilst Darren was talking. I don't know the player because it just says Facebook user, but I'm sure they'll reveal themselves. I think my funniest moment was being the best player in my league, turning up for my first ever tournament, expecting to win it easily, and losing my first round robin game 4-0 to one of the rank outsiders. Big wake-up call in standards between competitions and local leagues. I think that's. I think we've all been there with that one. When you play at a little, local league level, then you go to a tournament, you realise, oh my God, it's a different game, different world. Well, funny enough, one of the funniest things that I've experienced in the game, I've got so many stories to share, was I can't talk about the person because it would be unfair, but we went to, I think it was, I'm sure it was Oxford, tournament in Oxford. It may have been Cheltenham actually, but the guy that I was with was from Scotland, who lived, let's just say, in Edinburgh. Okay, and we got the train down from Birmingham to the tournament, and when we arrived outside the venue, we got there quite early, and David Matthews, who's obviously a legend of the game as we know, he rolled up and he had like a sunroof, so he had quite a nice car sunroof, and I'll never forget this person. He threw a firework as David parked up into through the sunroof, and the firework exploded in David's car before the tournament started. I remember David coming out of his car and just going absolutely mental at everyone around him, and this person did that. And the very same person as well on the way back home after we'd finished the tournament. He is the only person I've travelled with on a train where he's turned the lights off the entire train. So I don't know what he did. He got into the fuse box and he thought it was a dare to turn off the lights on the train back to Birmingham. So, yeah, very funny story. But I'm sure David Matthews, if you ever get the chance to interview him, he'll remember the firework through his sunroof. So, look, we're coming near the end now of the show, and there's been so many great stories to share. For me, you know, when you look at the game that we've had, with the game that we have today, some of the great things that we've had, you know, about traveling, some of the trips we've had. I'd say to you, one of my final questions for the evening, Darren, which one player has made you laugh the most over the years? You there, Darren?
I think before I answer that, I mean, we've talked a lot this night about, you know, great players. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you now.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. He's gone again. So, Eric, okay, I'll move on to you. Over the years, you've obviously met a lot of friends, a lot of people. Which person would you say, which player has made you laugh the most over the years?
Over the years, the Thierry Vivron is for sure the friend that makes me laugh the most, because we share the same kind of humor, and we've traveled almost everywhere and played the same kind of tournaments. And so both on the pitch and outside the pitch, he is the one that makes me laugh the most still now.
Thierry Vivron. I'll never forget him, actually. Years ago, he's one of the first players that invented the screech when you score, Thierry Vivron, because I've never heard anybody scream as loud as him, probably in a tournament. Maybe there's been a few, but Carlos maybe, but his scream was legendary, Thierry. I mean, I think it was just we or Ale or something.
Definitely,
it's just ridiculously loud. Yeah,
definitely.
Very funny man. So Darren, are you back with us? He's gone again. So Clinton, you know, who's it's South Africa. Which players, you know, laughed the most over the years?
Yeah, well, you don't know them. On the one hand, it's one or two players that get particularly tense. Always makes me chuckle because I enjoy the game. And then at the other extreme, actually one of your countrymen who lives here, and you were talking about beer earlier, he always rocks up to all our tournaments with a few beers, and inevitably has his own interpretation of the rules. But yeah, all just in the name of fun.
Do you think? Yeah, that's fantastic. But do you think South Africa? Do you think they're going to be playing in the next World Cup in 2022?
Well, I think we were very close to coming, had it been last year in September. So I'm hoping now. I mean, I know it's in 2022 now, so I'm really. I think there's a good chance.
Well, that would be great. Obviously,
Really great.
Yeah, and one of the great things you can do. I'm just adding Darren back now. Hopefully, he's back. He should be back any second. But one of the great things about playing in the World Cup is, you know, taking part is fantastic. But if you have the chance to play some friendly internationals, like say with Japan or USA or Australia, that would be really good for you guys at the World Cup if you get the chance. Because I know the Americans love to do that before an event.
We've already discussed it with both the Australians and the Americans.
Yeah, it's not friendly though, guys. I'll tell you that now. Not with the Australians, and it never is with the Americans. That's so. Yeah, a question. You've got a lot of friends in the game. Which player would you say has made you laugh the most over the years? If you've got that question.
Well, it's the same guy that's made me cry in pleasure. really. It's the same guy that's made me cry in equal measure, and it's Eric. You know, love him or loathe him. I mean, I've had some incredible times with Eric Verhagen in the EPL days. I mean, the guy. I mean, I do miss him immensely. I mean, he's incredibly passionate, never far from controversy. But when you're with him, we had some great. We really did. So yeah.
Oh, he's gone again. He's gone again. So I think he's obviously referring to Eric Verhagen, world champion. He's had a lot of funny experiences with Eric. He's not playing the game anymore. I'm not sure if he's going to return, but he is obviously a legend of the game. I remember watching some of his matches, Eric Verhagen versus Carlos Flores, and it was always, oh my God, it was intense stuff. You know, the two guys were just at it, you know, really, really competitively. Are you with us, Daz? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm back for now.
Yes, Eric Verhagen then.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so
yeah, Eric was he's a special friend, Eric. I don't think nobody knows where.
No, you've obviously played a lot of events with him, so a lot of great experiences. But I know that you've also had some good fun with, say, Casper as well. So, but I'm sure some of those stories need to be left on tour. Look, guys, I think.
Yeah.
Are you with us now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry, you speak. Sorry. Yeah, I can now.
Yeah, I was just going to make reference, really. I mean, we've talked tonight a lot about great players, past and present, but I'd just like to make a reference, really, to two guys who, without these two, there wouldn't be the great players and the game, really. One is John Lauder in Wales. I've known John for 30 years, and what he's done by keeping the guys in Wales playing and basically keeping the likes of Phil Dacey out of prison to start with, you know.
Yeah.
And in the similar vein with Juan Carlos Granados, it's the same. You know what he's done with the Spanish guys and the Murcia team, and those two guys are very similar. And without them, you know, we wouldn't have tournaments. There wouldn't be the players. So yeah, I just wanted to make reference to those two. Those are two personal friends of mine, and I think those two guys put more into Subbuteo than anyone I know. Certainly more than any of the great players we've talked about. Yeah,
it's a really valid point, actually, because but it gives me food for thought for the questions for the future, because, you know, John Lauder is an absolute legend. Never far away from the bar, John. But he's a cracking guy, lovely guy, and got a lot of time for John. I've known him for a long time. And obviously Juan Carlos, I mean, wow. If you look at, in terms of an academy director, he is just incredible. The players that have come from Murcia, I mean, how many world champions? It's at least 4.
3 or 4, yeah.
It's incredible.
Basically, it's more the British national team, isn't it?
Yeah, just absolutely fantastic. Well, look, I just want to say, unfortunately, we had a few breakups. We've had one final comment. We've had Darren Finch from Derby. Justin, I'm sure you won't remember me, but we did play each other once in Birmingham. You beat me 3-2. He's not a relation, by the way, Darren Finch. I remember him from Matlock, so I remember him quite well, actually. So hello, Darren. Had a comment actually come in as well from Sven Schilling. Okay, so he said, my funniest was traveling to Cape Town and playing in the Cape Town Open and being a certified football referee. Clinton ropes me into reffing Sven. Oh, he's referring to Sven versus one of the Cape Town guys who is built like a WWE wrestler. And throughout the entire 30 minutes, it was like reffing a boxing sparring match, with Sven questioning most of my calls and sarcastically saying, this must be African rules. And the local lad saying, shut up and play. You're on mute, Clinton. You're on now.
Sorry. Well, the local lad that I think is referred to there is actually your countryman that I refer to. And actually, now that you mention it, one of our funniest moments was actually watching him, this Brit play against this quite intense German and debating the rules. And it was quite an amusing game, watching from the sidelines. We didn't dare get involved.
Well, I always think if there's an argument between an English and a German, we have to remember two things, really. We invented the game and we invented the rules, so we're right. And we're
I'll pass that on.
Yes.
Actually, I don't dare.
There'll be a load of snowflakes now writing in saying he's a disgrace. But anyway, thank you, guys. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing all three of you. I know we had some technical issues; it didn't help, but your stories are amazing, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to do this again sometime. But Darren, obviously, you're a legend of the game. Fantastic. For me, one of the greatest players that England's ever had. Eric, of course, the same I could say for you in France, and Clinton as well. But Eric, fantastic to have you with us this evening, and thank you so much for your time. Clinton, with the best connection.
Today, but all the days.
That's no problem. And Clinton, I can't believe that South Africa has the best connection, even though
even though we have no light.
You've got a blackout.
Justin, we still have a game coming on the beach. Remember that one? Yes,
that's going to be either Clifton or Camps Bay Beach. Yeah, and you might beat me because I'll be looking at the girls. But anyway, Darren, Eric, Clinton, thank you very much for your company this evening. We'll see you soon. Cheers, guys. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks. See you, boys. Bye.